Hey everyone, my name is Shanice and welcome back to my channel. Another year, another big book challenge. Since 2022, since I started the channel, I've been doing this big book challenge where basically I choose 12 books, one book for each month, that are huge, that I own, and that I want to tackle. I started doing this mainly because my physical TBR is just, it's growing, it's ever growing, and I'm one of those people, I want to complete my TBR. I long for the ability to just go into a bookstore, buy a book, read a book right away, put it away on my shelves, and looking at my shelf knowing I read that book. I've experienced that book. Sometimes what prevented me from just diving into my physical TBR is the length of some of the books. It's been a great way to try to tackle my ever-growing TBR, which right now is almost 300 books. 176-ish of them are ones that I own physically. The rest are like Kindle or digital version of some sort. Next to me, I have the pile of 12 gargantuan books that I have chosen. Now in my third year of doing this, I am getting very impatient. I want to finish the big books on my TBR specifically. This year, compared to the others, maybe I have the least diverse list. I like to try to just get as many perspectives from as many places as I can. I am happy though, there are some translated fiction picks here, some classics, and overall just books that I've owned for a very long time, too long if you ask me. So I will go through the books, my TBR list for this year, in order from January all the way to December. So starting with the month of January, this month, a book I have not started yet, but I know I will finish this month. This was one of my picks, I think 2 years ago. Obviously I didn't get to it, but this year I mean serious business. The Crimson Petal and the White by Michelle Faber. This is set in the 1870s Victorian era London, and we follow our main character, Sugar. She's 19 years old and she is a prostitute for a living, and we see her make her way through different social spheres of Victorian London. And we see her climb the social ladder, all thanks to a perfume magnate named William Rackham. From what I've heard, this features a lot of meta-literal, meta-fictional elements. Sugar is herself writing a novel about her experiences. We get pieces of William's daughter's diary. There are sermons scattered throughout here. And from what I've heard, this is very sweeping and atmospheric, and I hope perfect for the winter. And then for my February pick, a book that I got at my university's library sale, I think in 2012. This is called Judge on Trial, and it's by Ivan Klima. This is a Czech novel translated from the Czech by A.G. Brain, which is, yes, actually the translator's name. This chronicles Czech history from the perspective of a flawed judge whose name is Adam Kindle. He is presented with a case where he has to choose between sentencing someone to death or choosing to give him life in prison. So this judge, he is morally against the death penalty, but he knows if he doesn't choose the death penalty, he will be kicked out of his job. This is semi-autobiographical in that the main character and also the author, they both were survivors of Nazi concentration camps. The main character here, once he is freed from the camp, he starts getting disillusioned by socialism, mainly because when he is released in the 1950s, he sees what socialism is doing to his country. This supposedly has echoes of Kafka and Dostoevsky, so part thriller, part legal drama. This sounds really fantastic. Then for the month of March, I'm finally doing it. I am reading The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende, and this was translated from the Spanish by, what is her name? Magda Bogan. This was conceived once the author found out that her 100-year-old grandfather was dying, and it started off as a letter to him, which then developed into a full novel. Famously, this is inspired by 100 Years of Solitude. Specifically, this follows 4 generations of the Truenda family and is mainly from the 2 perspectives of Alba and Esteban. This alludes to a lot of real-life historical figures that are not specifically named here, but are, if you are familiar with Chilean history, then you would probably know who they are. And this traces the post-colonial social and political upheavals in Chile. In the month of April, I'm choosing a book that, though it isn't a huge book, I know I will be reading it very slowly. And actually the original version I had, the original copy that I had of it was much bigger, and so made more sense with this list. Then I got a newer edition that I prefer. Anyway, it's John Milton's Paradise Lost. So the poem itself is, I think, just 260 something pages. So not really huge, like I said, but I don't think I'm going to be flying through this. I want to just spend a lot of time dissecting this. And, you know, what can I say? This tells the story of the fall of man, the temptation of Adam and Eve by Satan, and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. And the main character here is Satan. So this was very controversial when it was first published, as you can imagine, because we get a sort of sympathetic view into Satan from the perspective of someone who led a failed rebellion against God, and then was banished to hell. And we see his perspective. He almost becomes a hero of the story. I know this book has influenced some of my favorite books ever, so I think it's about time I finally read The Paradise Lost. Very excited about this one, and kind of nervous, I'll admit. Then, what is this, May? For May, I have a nonfiction book. I tend to buy nonfiction books after I listen to podcasts, and after big historical things happen, and I just want to learn about those different topics or people or events, and then I never pick up the book, which kind of was the case with this one. I was listening to Pod Save America, and one of the hosts, Tommy Vitor, he mentioned that he was reading this and he was enjoying the perspective that he was learning from this book. The time that I was listening to that was when in 2022, in the beginning of 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. So I went and I bought this, and like, I don't know why I thought I was just going to read this book for fun, but here we are on my list to conquer this year. So I have chosen The New Tsar, The Rise and Reign of Vladimir Putin. This is by Stephen Lee Myers. He was a former Moscow bureau chief for the New York Times. This is supposedly the only complete biography in English about the sort of rise of Putin, and it gives us a very full picture of who this man is, who he was, how he started, how he rose to be an authoritarian. It presents him in all his devious complexity. A positive review from Tommy Vitor to me is a good thing. I'm hoping this is not too boring. I have a feeling it won't be. I have a feeling it'll be frightening and enlightening in equal measure. So yeah, The New Tsar, and this is thankfully available on audiobook for free on Hoopla. So I will most definitely be listening along while I physically read this. For the month of June, it's funny how I remember when I got these books. So this one, I had interviewed for a bookseller job, which I didn't get. At the end of the group interview, they allowed us to pick up one of these books that they had on the shelf, and I just randomly picked this one and never picked it up ever again. And that was way back in 2015, I think, 10 years ago. So 10 years later, I am going to be reading New Grub Street by George Gissing. This is another 19th century set novel. This takes place in 1880s London. We follow a cast of characters who are dealing with the ever-changing literary landscape of London. Grub Street in the 19th century was a real street, which became synonymous with the publishing of hack literature. When Gissing wrote it, Grub Street no longer existed, but this is very much in reference to that. Our main character, his name is Edward Reardon. He is a struggling novelist, and his group of acquaintances at work on Grub Street. And some of those include Jasper Milvain, who is an ambitious and pragmatic journalist, and Alfred Yule, who is a critic. And so we kind of see how failure affects friendships and how these three men, along with others, like I said, navigate the literary world that is just constantly changing and disappointing them. We can all relate to. I'm sure there are some things that we love and hate about the literary world, maybe booktube, maybe the publishing industry, etc. I love books about books, and maybe this will leave me inspired. Hopefully it's not too bleak. Have you read it? Have you heard of this? Let me know. And then for my birthday month of July, I always like to pick a book that'll be fun, maybe not too dense. And so for this year, I chose a very beautiful edition of The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami, translated from Japanese by J. Rubin. This will be my second Murakami. I read 1Q84, which was a wild ride. So we follow the main character of Toru Okada, and he is on the search for his wife's missing cat. As soon as he embarks on his journey, he realizes he also has to look for his wife. And this leads him to the underground world of Tokyo. And let me just read you the list of characters that he meets along the way, because it was, I can't make this up. This is completely Murakami. So he meets the likes of a psychic prostitute, a malevolent politician, a cheerfully morbid 16-year-old girl, and an aging war veteran who has been permanently changed by the hideous things he witnessed during Japan's forgotten campaign in Manchuria. This is kind of detective story with a little bit of, Murakami magical realism, and it's been compared to Mishima and Pinchin. It is very, very chunky, and oh my goodness, look, this is a crime. Look at that is very small text. In the month of August, I am choosing to read Light in August by William Faulkner. Faulkner can be hit or miss for me. This is a Southern Gothic that takes place in the 1930s South during Jim Crow. It's about a pregnant white woman named Lena Grove and a man named Joe Christmas. Joe Christmas believes that he is of mixed black heritage, although he appears to be only white. And through flashbacks, we get the story of how these two characters are connected to each other and also to this one mysterious man. This is a novel that draws on Christian allegory and oral storytelling tradition and portrays, like a lot of Faulkner stories, marginalized people dealing with the prejudice and discrimination of rural America. I had no idea that this was a Southern Gothic. I knew it had modernist elements, and modernism and I don't always get along. I liked and I read Intruder in the Dust, and that's about it. I've read some short stories, they're also good, but let's see. I have like a pretty good feeling about this. I hope Faulkner does not let me down. And in September, I am going to be picking up Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates. I bought this when that absolutely offensive, horrendous film adaptation came out in 2022. Never got around to it, but I think it's pretty well known that this is about Marilyn Monroe, or Norma Jean, and her rise into the Hollywood myth and icon that is Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn becomes an emblem of 20th century Hollywood and beauty and aesthetic and glamour. Hers is a tragic story, and I liked this phrasing from the Boston Review. They called it a rags to rags story, which, alludes to just the sadness that enveloped her life, her upbringing, and even when she was happy, she still was facing some demons. So I imagine this to be very harrowing, and I've never read any Joyce Carol Oates before. I'm excited about this, and this cover is gorgeous. And I guess speaking of demons, this is Demons by Fyodor Dostoevsky, translated by Richard Pevier and Larissa Volokonsky, translated and annotated. Apologies. I have read summaries of this book and I'm still not totally sure what it's about. Let me just read the summary on the back. So this is inspired by the true story of a political murder that horrified Russia in 1869. Dostoevsky conceived of it as a novel pamphlet in which he would say everything about the plague of materialist ideology that he saw infecting his native land. It is a riot of literary voices whose profusion, energy, and variety are rendered wonderfully in this New English version, blah blah blah. So I know nothing about what this book is about. Seems like it'll be about societal chaos, murder, decay, psychology, bleak humor, kind of like everything Dostoevsky does, but incredibly insightful. So I tend to read the Pevier and Volokonsky translations of Russian works when I get the chance, and I know Elif Batuman really loves this book. She raves about it. She wrote an essay on it, which I will link somewhere on the screen. Yeah, excited to read this and figure out what it is actually about. And then for the month of, what is this? November? Yes, November. I am reading Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This was the only novel published during Ellison's lifetime. It features Kafka-esque absurdity. Ellison in particular wanted to move away from the protest novel and focus on experimentation. In addition to Kafka, he was very much influenced by Dostoevsky and Faulkner. Hopefully in reading Dostoevsky the month right before this and Faulkner in August, I will see some of the literary influences in here. It's just a coincidence. I actually didn't know that Ellison was influenced by those writers, and especially in this book. It's just like, it's very fortuitous that my choices worked out this way. And so here we get a nameless narrator who is moving from the South to Harlem, and through his journey we experience the nightmare that is the United States for a Black man at this time. I've heard nothing but excellent things about this book and the writing in particular. I'm envisioning 5 stars. And lastly, I had to choose another book by this author because she wrote my #1 book of 2024, and I figure a longer form version of her work might be interesting to check out. And apparently this book is the author's favorite of her bibliography. She said it was her best constructed, her best structured, and her favorite one, which says a lot. So this is called The Apple in the Dark by Clarice Lispector. It was translated from Portuguese by Benjamin Moser. The main character, Martim, he is on the run. He's fleeing from a murder that he kind of thinks that he committed, but he's not totally sure. And so on his escape, he stumbles onto a farm owned by 2 women named Vittoria and Ermelinda. These 2 women are very tranquil until this stranger comes to them, and they are deeply affected by the mystery of Martim. Martin, he just wants peace and vigil, but it seems like life refuses to give that to him. I see this being described as metaphysical. According to Kirkus reviews, it's an experimental novel about becoming, existing, and being remade seductive. Seems like murder is a running theme in my selections here. Again, unintentional, but I don't know, maybe I just unintentionally buy books about murder and never read them. So yeah, I, of course, am expecting 5 stars. I think Lispector is a literary goddess. I'm excited. I'm very excited. Another beautiful New Directions copy here. They publish, I think, all of her works translated into English. That is the last one. That is my Big Books Challenge TBR for 2025. I love this challenge. Last year I did complete it. Well, I'm gonna count that I completed it. I did finish the 12th book yesterday in January of 2025, so not exactly in 2024, but I'm counting it because, like, I finished the 12. I completed it, right? And I am determined once again to reduce my TBR, my physical TBR. Please, 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 Shanice, focus this year. No more buying books unless I really love a library copy and I need to own it. This challenge is a great way for me to revisit sections of my library that are just ignored for years and years and years. Glad to rediscover some books on my shelves. So yeah, are you going to be reading any chunky books this year? If you are, please let me know down below. Have you read any of these monsters? Do you love any of them? Let me know. Let's start a conversation. And thank you so much for watching today. I will be back with some more challenge TBR videos. I still have my short story collections that I'm reading this year to talk to you about, as well as my list of Latin American books to tackle this year. So thank you again for watching, and like and subscribe. I will see you all next time. Bye.